Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Dr. Claudia Albers, Planet X research and professional physicist. And today I'd like to bring to you another one of my articles. This one is entitled Planet X and the Bible, Wormwood and the Artificial Sky. Now, in Article 120, entitled Planet X and the Bible, the Artificial Sun Simulation System, I show that there is evidence for the fact that the sun we see in the sky is not the real sun, but a device which simulates the sun. And in that article, I also argued that as a result of the solar system having been invaded by a system of all burnt out stars, which I've called stellar cores, that the sun has weakened significantly and goes completely dark periodically. Thus, the artificial sun seems to be an effort on the part of the powers that be to hide both the presence of the stellar cores in the sun's corona and the fact that our sun goes dark and is dying. However, the sun going dark would mean that both the moon and the planets would go dark as well. So it seems that if there is a need to simulate the sun, then there would be a need to also simulate the moon and the planets, and perhaps some stars. Thus, not only is a simulation of the sun necessary, but the system which would create an artificial sky would have to also simulate the moon and the planets. And this means that different elements would be required by such a system, and it's illustrated in this figure below. We would most likely have several elements. We do know that there are sun simulation devices inside the atmosphere and outside the atmosphere. So most likely the system is made up of elements inside the atmosphere and outside the atmosphere. So this would be a sun simulator. Perhaps there would be moon simulators. So this here is a moon simulator. It's not on during daylight if it's not needed. Here it's nighttime and the moon simulators are switched on. It would most likely be made up of sun simulation systems in orbit that would illuminate the atmosphere, and holographic projectors that would be able to project features on the sun in case anybody turns a telescope towards it. And it would most likely also simulate planets in the sky if necessary. So such a system would be made up of different elements which would move at a constant speed across the surface or parallel to the surface of the Earth. So different regions on the surface of the Earth would see different devices in turn as they move across. And thus, if part of the system is damaged, say if this part is damaged, then people who would be on the surface of the Earth, say at this point, would not see the sun, would not see a lighted sky, and so there would be no day for them as this part of the system goes by. And people that would be on the surface of the Earth, say at this point, if this was not working, would not see anything to do with what they were supposed to see that night. They wouldn't see no moon, they would see no planets. All of that would be darkened, so they wouldn't see that part until the next part of the system gets to the point where they are, and if that part is working, then they would see either the day or the night depending on the correct timing. Obviously, this would be controlled by a huge computer system that would know when to turn on the parts that ought to do with daylight and the parts that ought to do with nighttime. Now, there is irrefutable evidence for the presence of Planet X objects or stellar cores in the sun's corona, and I've written about that substantially. These objects connect magnetically with the sun, they draw energy from the sun, they thus rejuvenate or regain the ability to emit visible light. And they seem to have started arriving just over 100 years ago. So they've had a long time to draw energy from the sun and to severely weaken the sun. And they seem to still be arriving. We still have objects in the sun's corona that are dark. And after being here for a while, they start absorbing enough plasma to be enveloped in this new plasma from the sun and thus start emitting light in the sun's corona. There seems to be another one there, and this one appears to be emitting light. This one is dark, so it's probably one of the newest arrival. This one is about half the size of Jupiter, and so one of the smaller ones. But even though it's half the size of Jupiter, it means that it's still 5 times larger than the Earth. Now, as I explained in article 120, Revelation 8 verse 12 seems to be referring to this system, as it states, "Then the 4th angel sounded, and a third of the sun was struck, and a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of them were darkened. A third of the day did not shine, and likewise the night." So this seems to be referring to a third of this artificial illumination system being damaged, so that a third of the daylight illumination and a third of the nighttime illumination no longer works, as I explained with the illustrative diagram. And thus, as the Bible seems to provide an accurate description, which must have been written some 2,000 years ago, about the artificial sky illumination system that now seems to be in operation, it should be of interest to examine a few other verses which mention some other events that occur just before the system is damaged and may therefore be of interest. Now, in Revelation 8 verse 7, it states, "The first angel sounded, and hail and fire followed, mingled with blood, and they were thrown to the earth. And a third of the trees were burnt up, and all green grass was burnt up." Now, this seems to be referring to a meteorite shower, hail and fire. So hail is rocks, basically, and if they're on fire, they're probably moving through the atmosphere. And this seems to cause trees over 1/3 of the Earth's landmass to be burnt and destroyed, as well as all the grass. And, well, the stellar cores, and we can see an image of what that may look like. The stellar cores have brought into the solar system a lot of debris. And this debris seems to come it seems to be seen in some of the coronagraph images as some of these objects move away from the sun with CME plasma. And the debris surrounding them could also be seen around the blue stellar core, which was viewed through a telescope in May of 2017. And it was Scott who took photographs of that object. And by July of 2017, it was again photographed through a telescope, and it had lost a lot of the material that was clinging to the core of the star, thus suggesting that these very old stars shared their ionizing material. It's not viable. They shared it. They regained another one by absorbing plasma from the sun. And this is part of their rejuvenation process, which I describe in Article 100, Planet X Objects, the rejuvenation process. And you may look at that for more details. So this may be what a meteorite shower may look like. And it's not a meteor shower, it's a meteorite shower, because obviously this material that is on fire, rocky material, actually strikes the Earth. And a meteor burns up before it strikes the Earth, but a meteorite actually is still intact when it strikes the Earth. And here we can see this is the blue stellar core, and we can see that the material clinging to its surface actually creating stripes on it, and we see a lot of debris around the object. It was obviously shedding this material that makes up these stripes. And we can also see a lot of debris whenever there's a CME and one of these large stellar cores move away from the sun. This is why there seems to be white particles in front of these objects. They are not stars. They are actually material, debris that has invaded the inner solar system, most likely brought in by the objects themselves, because as we know, they shared a lot of material.